to Vintage Stereo Collectors. I don't normally appear in the videos, but I want to tell you a little bit of a story about the audio business. I call this the audio paradox, or the tape deck of Dorian Gray. I picked this 1983 Technics up for $5 from a thrift store. I don't normally buy tape decks, but I kind of once in a while like them. Besides, this was the last model to have the analog meters, and I like them better than digital. And these were really good. And I was just working on this, and I was thinking, wow, this thing looks like new, like it did in '83. I certainly don't look bad, but not like I did in '83. And I was thinking, boy, those days, these were just flying out the door. I think these were $199.99 or maybe $229 in that price range, which is quite a bit of money in the early '80s. And they were a good deck for the money. You could spend a lot more, you could spend a lot less. These were very reliable. And the thing about those days, as a bench tech and a car stereo installer and a home stereo installer, most of the repairs I did were actually on cassette decks, turntables maybe second, output stage of amplifiers third. And we did warranty work for Technics and Sensui and Yamaha, NAD. And the things that came back, it was usually somebody put a tape in, usually pre-recorded, it ate the tape, or whatever spilled on it, that type of stuff. The components are actually pretty reliable. Now there's some units, I remember when NAD came out with the 3020 and then the power envelope 3220, and those are blowing outputs like popcorn. And they were coming back, and it was funny. I remember selling one night. I stayed late on the sales floor, and I sold a 3220, and I said, this sounds like a 50-watt amp, but it's only 20 watts. It has this circuit that kicks in extra power. The guy said, well, that's great. I don't usually play it that loud. So I sent him out with one, have a nice day, sir. Any questions, hooking it up. And next day, the guy comes back after work carrying the unit with the box open, and he goes, hey, it quit playing, and there's a burning smell. What the is wrong with this thing? I'm like, uh-oh, that was the first one. We got quite a few of those back. We were able to do a modification. There's a factory modification to improve reliability, but it was typical with amps. They usually came back either to clean controls because they were noisy, or somebody drove it too hard for too long with some books sitting on top and blew the outputs. With turntables, did a lot of belts, a lot of cartridges, needles, that kind of stuff. And it's funny, like, this is now a vintage unit, very vintage. It's got analog meters. It's an analog unit. I mean, it's from the early 1980s. But I learned a lot in those years working there. It wasn't the first audio shop I worked at. I actually worked at another one before that was a Denon dealer, and it was a much smaller shop. And I mentioned this in another video. The owner, originally the shop, it was a Zenith TV store. And the owner ended up, in a nursing home. He was like 80-something years old. And a stereo shop took over the business, so moved in their Denon. Oh, and yeah, we had Technics as well. And this was a big expansion. And I was hired as a bench tech in college at the time. And I went in there, and there's just a mountain of repairs to do. And what was funny is it was still the same phone number. And so I was sitting at a bench with stuff all around me and a phone over there, and the phone would ring and say, and I had to answer it as Area Audio G Rouge TV Clinic. And it'd be like, oh, I have an old Zenith color TV and now the sound's gone. Can you come out? I'm thinking I got 10 units ahead of me and there were only 2 techs. It was so busy, it was crazy. But boy, you learned how to diagnose quickly. It was really something. And I'd go to people's houses, and they'd have these 1960s roundy TV sets still in operation, and they wanted it fixed. They didn't want a new TV. They wanted their 1965 Zenith roundy. We also did RCA and Quasar. And the place had thousands of vacuum tubes and parts. But anyway, that was pretty interesting. And what amazes me is some of these TV sets, you go out to do a service call, and something, it was beyond just a tube or some contact cleaner. You had to get back to the shop. You're by yourself. And I'd get a console into the trunk of the boss's car by myself. You know what these things weigh, and get it back to the shop and get it in the back door of the shop. Didn't seem to be hard. Now I couldn't even lift it off the ground, even a corner of it. But anyway, this is the Paradox with audio equipment. Somewhere, okay, in order for this to be a pristine cassette deck, the Dorian Gray technique somewhere in a closet is one falling apart, covered in spider webs, with Pepsi Cola in it that's leaked through the top and burned on fire. Anyway, just a joke. Thanks for watching and listening.